everybody, I'm just teasing. It's all take a minute.
Are you teasing or?
Wow.
Do we have to do this every time you make a joke?
See, it's funny because
That was Olivia being funny, everybody.
Are we getting
that
close to streaming yet here?
I think we are, unless that
Oh.
clock is still fast.
Oh, I think this. Yep. I think it might be.
I don't know any of those things.
Me neither. That's Father Chris.
I did not push any buttons.
I've never
We
had
could
to
ask
push
him, Father
those
Chris, are we
buttons.
streaming right now?
He's grayed out. I think hopefully he's having a good drink.
If he's in Dublin, right?
You said
Yeah.
it was early in the morning, right?
It's
like almost
no,
2 in the morning.
There's
Wait,
6
wait, wait.
hours. There's 6
6 hours? Okay.
Yeah,
So it's
it'll be 1
It's
o'clock.
almost 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
1 a.m.
And he's awake.
I'm sure he is.
Yes. Bless his heart.
Bless his
So,
heart.
I know there was a time that it would we would go live at about 20 till, and then I thought it was 15, but maybe it is 10 till.
I thought
Yeah,
it was 15.
I'm waiting for
Notification.
the notification.
Oh, there we are. I see us on Twitter. That's Twitter. All right.
I hear
So-
the timbre of Jeff's voice.
Yeah, so it's happening, y'all. I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna retweet it.
I like it. I love it.
Don't
Oh,
start.
more.
Yes.
Yeah.
But where's the Facebook one?
Now that is a good question. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, there's that. Help.
I literally don't know how to do that.
Tweet. There we go. Tweet.
Do we have any thoughts on getting the Facebook feed up?
I have no control over that. That's something that is done in that magic box, and I believe that Father Chris sets that up. So, let's see.
It must be an automatic thing because
Yeah, I know you schedule it.
Stream spot.
Yeah. But again, I don't even know how it's done. It's at the box right there next to the samurai.
Oh.
So, okay, well maybe it is 10 till. I know that, we got it happening on Twitter. We got to make a road trip to Masala. I'm hungry for some buttered chicken and some naan bread.
Always love that non-bread.
Oh my!
What's
yeah.
happening?
Indian food
yeah.
Oh.
in Lafayette, and I'm not a big fan of Indian food, but theirs is remarkable. It doesn't have that curry overload. It's
I remember the one time we got Indian food after the show, and I asked for the mildest thing on the menu.
Yeah.
And I looked the guy in the eye, and I was like, "You know what I mean, don't you?" And he's like, "Yes, don't worry." And it was so spicy.
oh man.
It was so spicy. And so I ate bread.
Maybe you
It was-
inflected your voice wrong.
I
You know what I mean, right?
I tried to put the fear of God in his eyes. I was like, dude, I need the mildest thing on this menu, but still yummy. What can you do for me?
Oh yeah. Well, I took a friend there one time, and he said, "I really want it. I mean, whatever the most extra hot thing you have."
Heck
And
no.
they bring it out to him, and he calls the waiter back over. He says, "You got anything hotter?" He said, "About the only thing we have left is chili paste." He says, "Bring it."
Oh,
It's like,
gosh.
come on, man. I just, I like a little spice, but for me, it's not about the heat as much as it is the flavor. So there,
Yeah.
I said it.
Yeah, I don't have any directions on Facebook stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, there you go then. 10 till. Let's see if we get a notification now.
My computer's about to die.
It's okay. We would be worried if these things weren't happening.
Yeah.
It's true. Why they gotta happen in the last 5 minutes?
Because that's how it works. I don't know how anything works. I feel like I should say that now. I sit on this end far away from technological things, and I promise not to trip over wires, and that is what I do to contribute.
It's a good tagline. That's how this works.
That's how this works. Ba-dum-dum. All right.
Put this in down by your feet. That's a bad idea. This way.
Today, and as it was celebrated then, is it involved a
What was that?
I think that's their live feed
What?
of the radio, the radio.
Oh, the current. What's
Yeah.
currently?
Facebook. I get all kinds of comments. Is there a show tonight? No.
Back up.
Sorry, we suck.
No, we don't.
We don't know how to do it. We've lost Father Chris.
All will be well. Are we recording at least? Okay.
We will be.
I just feel like that's something that he asks. I'm trying. I don't know. This is my contribution.
Thanks, Olivia.
I'm doing what I can.
You're doing well.
That's how it works.
And that's how it works. Good night, everybody.
Be sure to tip your servers.
Yeah, for sure do that. Please do that.
For sure.
For sure.
For sure.
So,
For sure no.
This is one of those moments where I hope that Father Chris is listening and that he's going, I gotta go turn on the Facebook.
His little
yeah.
fish is activated again.
Well,
Does he have telephone?
Does he have telephone?
oh sure. You could text him. I don't know how expensive that is, but text him or
He'll accept the
we're
charges.
we're definitely on Twitter though.
I don't have Twitter.
Ba-da-da-boom.
I do, I just forgot my login. So I can't go share it there either.
You're doing great, Kathleen.
I don't know what I'm doing, but
Doing
here
amazing.
it is.
Amazing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, we're getting there.
Who's there?
So then,
Hello?
Hello.
Good job, Father Ryan. I think he's listening. Oh, rats. you know what? Father Chris isn't here. We're on his I think we're logged into his thing on the
Oh,
on
that's
the
Ed's logged into it. Yeah, that's what
Oh,
it is.
okay. Are you also logged into his Facebook account and therefore can-
Yeah, it's all right.
That's awesome.
Should we post something on? I'll post something on the
Yeah, like go to Twitter. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to be helpful. I don't really know what to do.
go somewhere else?
Get off of Facebook.
Do something with your lives.
That's our message for you tonight. Be better than this. Oh, it's great.
Jeff. Where else does it go to live? Where else does the video go to live?
I believe does it go to YouTube? I believe it's the YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook.
Can they listen on Catholic CCR?
You could link to the live feed from YouTube on Facebook, because that's working. I see that now. So I
How
mean,
come my YouTube's not working?
Mine's not either. Unable to establish a secure connection.
ooh, Apple, awkward.
Are you on YouTube?
Yes.
You're a turd, Olivia. Send the link in the send the link in the notes real quick.
Okay.
Watch. There's like some hacking group that's hacking everyone on YouTube right now. My computer's only saving me, and you're getting your own information.
Yeah,
stolen.
that's what's happening.
That's probably what's happening.
That's so cute that you think.
So cute,
Okay.
you're a conspiracy theorist.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me more about the little green men.
How many voices are there?
3.
Sure now.
All right, we're about 2.5 minutes away.
Father, would you like to?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, one thing Father Chris always calls upon Saint Michael to help us when it comes to the tech stuff.
All right. Name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Loving, merciful Father, please just inspire us as we engage in this ministry to share your word, your love, and witness to your grace to the world. Please help us as we go through this show to rely on each other and your spirit. And please pray for all of our listeners out there and all watching, that you may protect them, their families, and they might be able to get something fruitful from this. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, pray for
Pray
us.
for us.
Yeah.
Father, Son,
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit. Amen.
I wonder if that's the
I
case.
d- yeah.
No.
All right, for those of you who are listening and watching us on YouTube, we'll be back in a little bit.
And Twitter.
And
After
Twitter.
these messages.
After these
Tweet.
messages.
Everything's gonna be
Yeah.
fine.
Everything's
Yeah,
gonna
we
be fine.
just
It's
go to
great,
the
it's fine,
wide
it's
shot
fine.
here because we still have a minute and a half to fill.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I see where you posted it on Facebook. That the
I did. I just
That's
posted a link
great.
to the.
So good.
forward thinking. That's good.
I will
Yeah.
share it. I will share it on my Facebook.
Okay,
And I
good.
don't share anything.
Please, please.
So you
do.
should feel honored.
All right.
Oh, I feel dirty. I just shared something.
Okay,
on
we're
Facebook.
less than a minute away. I'm going to put a program audio, and then we'll be back at the top of the hour. Don't go anywhere.
They are having an abortion because they feel they have no other choice. Coercion can be subtle, such as the perception from a partner of abandonment. Or coercion can be more dangerous, including threats of physical abuse. Women have been lied to by the abortion industry, and they deserve better than abortion. You may be the voice that can empower a woman with the confidence to resist the pressure and choose life for them and their baby. If you know a pregnant woman in need of help, visit us at prolifelouisiana.org.
The way,
Our catechism,
the truth,
Holy Scripture,
the life.
Catholic tradition.
Now, more than ever.
WPYR 1380 AM Baton Rouge and WPYR LP 105.9 FM Baton Rouge.
Today on the show, an Incredibles family, a few steps on the Via Dolorosa, our actions speak louder than our words, our picks of the week, and so much more. The Catholic Underground starts right now. That's right. It is time for the CU Weekly, the podcast that tries to cut through the noise of the digital continent and bring you the topics that matter. This is episode 377. I am not Father Chris Decker. I am Kathleen Lee. As you know, Father Chris and Father Ryan are across the pond, but joining me this week are Olivia Galino, Associate Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry for the Diocese of Baton Rouge. Hello, Olivia.
Hello.
Yes, we have a guest, Father Ryan Halford, the other Father Ryan. He is parochial vicar of St. Jude the Apostle Catholic Church here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Good to have you.
Hi, everybody.
Jeff Blackwell, of course, is up in space in the Jeff Star 1. Look him up there. He's our technical director of CU and commandant of the Jeff Star 1 near or Earth orbit satellite.
Glad to be here, Captain Kaylee.
That's a long intro.
No, I didn't write it, though.
I love it, though. Of
I
course,
live it.
you know who else we love? Ed Ball.
Yeah, we do. And where is he?
He
In the-
is, of course,
The ball pit.
in the ball pit.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
he is our video and graphics director. So glad that you guys could be with us. As you know, as we said, Father Chris and Father Ryan are across the pond on assignment, I suppose. They've been posting some really good things on their blogs, and if you haven't been keeping up with that or you missed the last show, it is at Father Chris Decker, all words spelled out, .com. And you can also follow Father Ryan at frhumphreys.com. And we'll put all that in the show notes. But we want to welcome our other Father Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would just to say this, I've been asked many times the last few months if I'm looking forward to going on the Camino with Father Chris. And
Oh, okay, yeah.
very much so, I am. One day, maybe. But I am not that Father Ryan.
Even in the planning process of this, when Kathleen would say, and Father Ryan is doing this, and I'm like, Kathleen, Father Ryan's not going to be here.
Yeah. Well, we are super glad that you're here, Father Ryan and I guess Olivia too. Father Ryan and I, I'll speak to that. Go back
yeah.
several years.
I was like, I don't know, I can't agree before you say it. I don't know what you're talking about.
You can't read my mind. What's
Sorry,
coming
I'm
out.
working on it.
But Father Ryan and I have had many, many adventures together, so I'm very excited that you're here. Father Ryan, have you been to the movies lately?
I have gone to the movies recently.
Yeah. Seen any good ones?
Yep, I've seen some good ones. Yeah, do you?
Okay.
Would you care to elaborate?
Wait, no. Well, a couple weeks ago, I saw The Incredibles 2. Olivia, have you seen this?
No, and I really want to because I love the original one. The Incredibles is one of my favorites.
Father Ryan, you were saying that you like the original as well.
I enjoyed the original. I did watch the new one. The new one was very enjoyable, but I did think the original one was better.
I don't remember the original. Gasp. I know. I don't.
This movie came. The second one came because so many people loved the first one.
Yeah.
For the last decade, they were like, we need a second one.
Yeah.
So they finally delivered.
Yeah. I loved it. I took my two nephews a couple weeks ago when I was in Denver. We went on an adventure and took them to the movies. It was Cameron's first time. Cameron is 4. So it was great fun.
Did they get any ideas from the baby in the movie?
No, thankfully. They were talking though. It was a little bit darker. Like there were times when Cameron reached up and like grabbed my hand. I was like, he was a little scared, but it has a really good message, I think. And there were some hidden nuggets in there as well, right? So this new sequel to the original that everybody loved contains some very timely messages about family life. Of course, it's a family of superheroes, right? Who have in this movie, not to spoil anything, have had to hide parts of who they are as superheroes. They've had to go kind of into hiding.
Witness protection.
Yeah, and while it is a kids movie, right, with a typical superheroes plot, The Incredibles 2 also portrays a family reality that might speak to you and me, right, in our own families. Right, with themes of like family unity and thinking of each other and the difference in familial roles, like what is my role, what is my place in the family, right? All of these topics are touched upon in this new movie, and some of the most interesting ideas are, get ready because we have a list.
Yeah, we do.
As we love here at the Underground, right? Number 1, in the family, everyone has an important role, right? No matter how many attempts Bob and Helen, who are the parents, make to remove the children from the problems and obstacles they face, it's the kids who end up saving the day over and over again, which I think is really interesting because Nowadays with parents, and I, disclaimer, am not one, so I'm just going to put that out there. But being a teacher and watching, interacting with a lot of families and parents, there's a tendency to try to protect your child, right, from the problems they may face or the dangers or difficulty or suffering, right? Often we want to take responsibility away from children and just let them enjoy life, right? Let them be free. But life teaches us, adults, children alike, like it taught Bob and Helen, the parents in The Incredibles, that we can't keep them away from reality, right? And suffering really is a part of that. If we give them the chance, children, right, can show us that they are capable of very big things, even in the face of this kind of adversity, And I think for me, being a teacher, I reflect a lot on how, my parents were really good at letting us, that sounds horrible, but like letting us suffer, right?
Well,
yeah.
Well, I would say that, when the stakes are low, because there's a difference between protecting your kids from society versus preparing them to engage society.
Sure.
And so I think parents need to find, especially when the stakes are low, to find ways to be a little bit adventurous, to learn, cause and effect, and have a realistic way of engaging the world.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that, I'm always shocked that if we, when we talk about young people, I was like, oh, they won't get it, they won't understand. And I'm like, man, just give them a chance, see what happens, right? So, number 2, the theme that together is always better, right? The strength of the family lies in its unity. Hello, sounds very simple, yet I think something that is not evident in our society today, right? The film shows that the Incredibles are stronger when they're together, when they help each other out. Right? It's a great message to give to our kids. Whatever happens, your family will always be there for you. And you can always count on them, thank you, Jeff, right, to help you even in the most difficult moments of your life. I think a lot of times growing up, that was something that I was blessed with is, my parents were always like, whatever happens, call us.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times as young people, we're like, they'll never understand, they're going to kill me, whatever it is. But I was really fortunate to have parents who were just like, we're in this together, Yeah. So number 3, fatherhood and motherhood are the work of superheroes, right? What? Yeah, when we see Bob, so the dad, right, trying to survive, taking care of his 3 children, the mom goes off to work as a superhero. He's left with these, 3 crazy kids, right? We realize that being a parent involves more effort and work than being a superhero. He realizes that, that he's more exhausted at the end of the day trying to take care of his kids, than he is when he's out on the streets saving the world, right? And even Edna, this woman,
Edna,
right? She tells Bob in this beautiful, phrase, right? She says, done right, fatherhood is a heroic act, done right. Right? So when our parents are good, are invested in their role, when they do the job of being moms and dads, right? That's the work of a superhero. Right, and it's everyday stuff. It's everyday, like doing the laundry and, preparing meals for their kids as they shove them out the door to go. Watching my friends who are young parents, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
This is incredible.
Yeah. I think this speaks also to a struggle we had, that sometimes we think the work outside of a house is more valuable and more difficult than the work inside the house. And I think that's one of the things, is just because it often doesn't get a paycheck or it isn't as honored in our society. Actually, the work, the economy of the household is really where our work outside of the house is supposed to be ordered.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Right, and that leads us to number 4, that true love takes sacrifice. Absolutely, right? In the film, we see how Bob, the dad, right, takes care of the children so that Helen, the mom, can go out to work as a superhero. And this is a huge sacrifice for him, right? Because what she is doing is what he dreams of, right? But he is able to sacrifice himself for his wife and for the good of his family, for his children. And he does it with dedication and joy, right? Not always in the film. He struggles a little bit, right? But this is the sacrifice that he realizes that he's called to make. And in doing so, he realizes the enormous value of his wife's work, right, in their home, right? A lot of times you see this a lot stereotypically, generally, with dads who have to maybe stay at home with their children for a sick day or something like that, or mom goes out of town, and they realize all of the things that their wife does without, that just get done. And Olivia, I don't know if your mom ever did this, but all the things that just happened in your life when you were growing up, and you realize one day, like maybe when you move out on your own, somebody had to do that.
Oh yeah, I'm very acutely aware of that now that I have my own house, and even the other day I found like a huge spider web, and I've been in there for like 2 months. Like, how have they already had time to move in? And I'm still not there yet. But I was like, oh man, so I got to do this now, and I gotta paint the bathroom, and I gotta fix the sprinkler. I gotta mow the lawn too. And I'm thinking of all these things, and I'm like, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Because as I'm thinking of things, it's just unfolding on itself, and I'm realizing like this is on me now. Like this is wholeheartedly my responsibility, and like thanks be to God. But I'm also starting to realize that's a lot of weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Even today, as this is our first show with Father Chris being gone. I came in, and Father Chris has left us plenty of instructions, and even in this relationship, I'm realizing what love he has for the show, all the things that, and he's like, and then you have to wait, and then you have to upload this, and it takes 12 hours, and then you have to come back. I'm like, wow, like that's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. So number 5, right? If we want to be happy, there are times when we have to sacrifice and give up certain things. Yeah. Right? But this change of plans made by others and with love will surely bring many good things to our family, right? And so what a beautiful gift that this movie is, this film is, that it refocuses on the family, and in a beautiful way, talking about the sacrifice of parents, and highlighting the idea that this couple, this whole family really is superheroes, right? But that this couple, that's not their greatest role, right? That's not who they are. That they are first mothers and fathers and members of that family, the Incredibles. One of the other things I wanted to kind of highlight has nothing to do with family, but I think this film is pretty genius. So we're in the middle of watching it, and the bad guy, his name is Screenslaver. Poignant? I think so. And so we're watching it, and I've got 2 little ones on the side of me, and they're like, oh, can we have more popcorn? Like, where's my drink? And I'm like, shh, shh, shh. He's saying something really important. But he, is talking about this idea that the other theme of the movie is how we have become slaves to our screens, slaves to our electronics. Wow. And he has this incredible monologue, and I want to read just a little part of it. And it just really struck me as something like commentary, where at the same time that they're building up the family, this movie is also pointing out where we as humanity, are really lacking. So he says this, he says, superheroes are part of a brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk, you watch talk shows. You don't play games, you watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk, every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves to rise from their couches to break a sweat, never anticipate new life.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, what?
Yeah.
What? Like this incredible refocus. Like, he's calling us out. Like, and at this point as an adult in the movie theater, I'm like, right? It's so true.
The screen told you all that,
Yeah,
right?
the screen told me all that. I'm like, yes, Screenslaver, yes, right? But at the same time that this movie is highlighting, look, this is where you are as a society, it's also pointing back to the family and saying, this is where it starts. This is where your interaction, this is where your new life comes from. Right? This is where you should be playing, where you should be talking to each other, not sitting back and watching it done on a screen. Pixar, Disney. I mean,
I would recommend.
I want to shake that person's hand.
Right?
Whoever wrote that.
Right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
You could probably find them on Facebook and like their page.
Probably.
Yeah.
That defeats the point, though. I need the human interaction, Father. I was trying to make a
his
point.
name was Disney. Walt Disney.
I am a credit watcher, and this is one of those. It serves you well to stay through the credits and watch it to the very end.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, you know what else is incredible?
Oh, what's that?
That you have found us here at the Catholic Underground. That's right. You are listening, maybe watching, we don't know, the Catholic Underground, but we're glad that you're here. We're online at CatholicUnderground.tv. I'm Kathleen Lee. Jeff Blackwell, Olivia Galino, and Father Ryan Hofford are here, and our picks of the week are coming up. But first, there is one thing, Father Ryan, that we need to be reminded of. Yes?
Yes, there is. Funny you should ask. So the article by Father Bill Peckman is focusing on what every Catholic must remind himself to stay humble. And so the important insight from the article is that he reflects on his own role within the church. He says, I can be replaced. I will be replaced. And I'm totally okay with that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the reality, is that something we can all learn, whatever ministry we're involved, whatever good work we're doing, we have a contribution to make. And maybe that's the question. How can we make a contribution? But how can we make way for the contributions of others and be okay when we're ultimately replaced, that we need to pass on the torch? And so we have a role, but it doesn't revolve around us. And then he goes on to explore 4 points related to this. He says, first, the church existed before us and it's going to exist after us, right? He says, the Roman Catholic Church has existed for nearly 2 millennia before me, and it will exist long after I am gone. And so I think even for all of us, when we think about the time we have here, relatively speaking, it's very short. Our work that we contribute to the body of Christ now, today, it's historically brief. And so we're here today, but we're going to be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't mean our work is insignificant, but that salvation history is a community effort, right? Even as you're talking about earlier, the role of the family. I mean, the church is a spiritual family. And so we take up these roles of spiritual brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers, and, new life coming through this. His second point is, as he mentioned in the credits, that via dolorosa, that way of suffering, that we must imitate the Lord, that we have a role in the earthly pilgrimage, that we are going to suffer for the sake of love on the behalf of others, on behalf of the church. And in doing so, that this will not come to an end until the resurrection. And so he kind of mentions that, as I'm carrying the cross, right, sometimes we're surrounded by hostile haters, but each of us, like Simon the Cyrene, we have our turn in carrying that cross. This reminded me of the verse from St. Paul to the Colossians, where he says, I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, right? But in my flesh, I am filling up what is lacking in the afflictions of the church. I don't know if you've ever been challenged, but what's lacking in the afflictions of the church, of Christ, in the afflictions of Christ. And in reality, his sacrifice, there's nothing lacking objectively, except that he chooses for us to participate in a role that takes seriously our freedom. And so basically St. Paul is saying, my participation, what I rejoice in taking up my role for the sake of participating in Christ's sacrifice. And I think that's really beautiful that, we each participate in each other's salvation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love the idea that, when I visualize the way of the cross, and that's something I hate that I wait until Lent to do it, but I wish that I did it more. That when we talk about the way of the cross and walking that with Jesus, just the idea that he didn't do it alone and we don't do it alone. That there were so many other people there. Right, and then that in that moment, I think one of the greatest things I believe it was Dr. Brant Petrie told me in one of my classes. He said, Christ didn't walk the way of the cross so that we could stand back and watch him, but that we could join him on the cross, right? That we could participate in that, right? That we could be participants in that way, right? The walk.
And even Pope Benedict, in Spe Salvi, when he's talking about the realities of the afterlife, whatever that is, he says, I think it might even be in the section on hell. He's talking about how no one is saved alone, no one is condemned alone, and no one sins alone. But I reverse the order, so it ends on hope, obviously. But yeah, that idea that no one is saved alone, that your actions, your prayers, your intercessions, and then the things that you do within the body of Christ to build her up in the church, those have real efficaciousness.
Yeah. So the idea that because sometimes I think we have this false notion of salvation. It's just me and Jesus. It's me and Jesus. But no, his body is the church, and he calls us to be spiritual family. And so, we each participate in Christ's salvation. And this is not never in competition with his work, but it's a participation, right?
Yeah.
Because some people think like, oh, salvation is either all Christ or all man, and obviously it's principally Christ, but like no, it's all Christ, but he does so in a way that it's also 100% man, fully divine and fully human, just as Christ. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. And this really goes well into that third point. He says, God chooses us to make our picking up of the cross necessary and important, efficacious. Yeah. And so the Lord invites us. I think this is what we were saying earlier with that thing about family. Can parents invite their children to have meaningful ways to participate in the work of the household?
Sure, yeah.
Right? And not because it's the parent, like, when you think about a mother cooking, like she might be able to do it more efficiently, better, but like the child wants to help and she's going to find ways, even though it's messier, it takes more time, because she knows it's good for that child. And so likewise, there's this profoundness that Christ, in taking on our human weakness, he really allows himself to become so weak, so physically weak, that he in that moment needs the help of Simon of Cyrene, and that plays a necessary and important role of helping him carry that cross to Calvary. And so that cross in our lives, it represents, he goes on to say, this dying to the self, which allows us to live out that vocation of love to which we are each called. Now, he's speaking about it, this brief article from the perspective of a priest, right? This call to embrace the life of Christ, of selfless service, to make Christ present in the sacramental life of the church. And so as a priest, like fulfilling these duties, this is just a small way we pick up a piece of the cross and walk, for several decades of years of life, until someone else comes and takes our spot. And so, just that reality. And he says that, like, I'm okay with being replaced, but I think this is one of the great troubles is, are we ultimately okay with someone coming and doing the things we do? I mean, this is a part of the spirituality of old age, as we, our children take up the responsibilities, as the next generation comes and takes up the role. Are we okay with allowing them to take up the role they need to do in terms of participating in the salvation of the church? Fourth, and he says one of the primary jobs is to raise up other disciples who willingly and joyfully embrace their part of the cross. I think this is the mission of the Mass, right? The word Mass, which means missa, the sending forth, that we are to go out and make disciples of all nations, teaching them all that Christ has commanded of us. And so I think it's a beautiful reminder that true leadership does not create a cult of personality. It doesn't make ourselves irreplaceable, but is really meant to enable the gifts of others. To be able to identify that, like, look, you have this gift, like, come and help me.
Yeah.
Come and participate. Come and bring it to the table.
Yeah, I definitely think there needs to be more of that in our ministry. A lot of times, like, we build ourselves up as, I'm going to walk away from this, and this is my
legacy.
Yeah. And then people just pick up and walk. But some of the greatest ministers I've ever seen in the church have been those who have, when they're walking away from a ministry, have brought someone else in and said, you have, like, as I am, as I am rising to
the Father,
like you too, you're coming with me because I see this in you, and it's not a one-person job. It's a, how many more people can I get to come with me?
Yeah, and it also doesn't become just like that. I like that phrase, cult of personality. It doesn't just become one person and their idiosyncrasies and their talents.
Sure.
And everything kind of revolves around that, to the point where when they leave, then everything falls apart because it was built. That was the crux in the middle.
Yeah. And so are you referring to Father Chris leaving and the show not falling apart?
No.
That's yet to be seen.
I'm referring. Oh my gosh, he is our crux. No.
Yeah, but I mean, I think.
Why are you trying to get me in trouble?
What?
Other Father Ryan.
You're not coming back. No,
yeah, that's it.
He's gone. Can we just go ahead and unplug his mic?
Yeah, but in another sense, I think there's also, like, we become so identified with the work we're doing that if we don't pass it on, if there's other people the Lord is calling to it, we may not be prepared to take on the next thing that he's calling us to.
Yeah.
And so how do we help people find their strength, their voice, to bear one another's weaknesses so we can all make a contribution to the church and show forth God's glory? And so I think this is it. We're all called to carry our crosses with and for the church, with each other. And so, I think this raises some important challenges. One is, how do we see our roles in the church? How do we see us participating in the sacrifice of Christ, uniting that to him? How do we see our contributions? Do we sacrifice for our own glory or for God's glory?
Yeah.
How can we have that spiritual indifference so that when, some good thing we're doing is not getting in the way of the better thing the Lord is calling us to? And have we done our work so that this can survive without us, that this good work can continue and the gospel can be carried on into the next generation? Or would we rather see the ministry to be destroyed than for it to survive without us?
Yeah.
Right? Rather than me being removed, right? Like, no, this is going down with me. And I think this is contrary, right? And so, he kind of comes into that insight. We must decrease so that Christ may increase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think that there, I definitely, you see this with the, you see it, and I'm going to pick on priests a little bit, love them very dearly, but you see it with priests who come into a parish, and then after their assignment's done, they leave. And it's heartbreaking for me as someone who knows kind of, what the church is all about, for them to say, well, I'm not going to church anymore because Father Ryan's not there.
Yeah.
Or you're
going to follow him.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're going to separate yourself from the good of that parish.
Right. And then that parish suffers from those people's gifts. But the idea of, this is all about me, or in the ministry, like I have built this up so that no one else can do it, and when I walk away, that's just it. Either the ministry dies, the parish dies, or they have to rebuild it. And nobody is empowered. Nobody is recognized. Like, these are your gifts. I see you coming in right after me and just running with it, and just in some of those situations, like I've been told, like, you're going to do so well. Your gifts are going to make it so different.
Yes, indeed.
Humility, man. We need it. But we are humbled that you are here with us. We're going to take a quick break, but we are the Catholic Underground. We'll be right back.
A prayer for vocations. O God, who wills not the death of a sinner, but rather that he be converted and live, grant, we beseech you, through the intercession of the Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, Saint Joseph her spouse, and all the saints, an increase of laborers for your church, fellow laborers with Christ, to spend and consume themselves for souls. Through the same Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen.
Welcome back. You have found the Catholic Underground with me, Kathleen Lee, joined by Olivia Galino, Father Ryan Halford, Jeff Blackwell, he's up in space.
Yes.
Ed Balls in the pit. Our picks of the week are coming up, but first, y'all, I don't know if you follow Bishop Barron, but I mean, he's pretty legit. If you don't, you need to, because the stuff that is coming through that man from the Lord, incredible. And he has put out a new article, right, about what we do, right, Olivia, and why it's important.
Actually, I think this one might be old. I think this might be like an anniversary thing,
cool.
from the archives kind of thing, because I'm pretty sure he wrote this when he was just father.
Oh yeah, look,
Robert
it
Barron.
says 2011.
Yeah, so we
My
got like
bad.
the 7th
That's a
anniversary.
classic.
This
right.
day in 2011.
We're bringing it back.
Well, just think about one day all of these will be compiled in some sort of like, I don't know, 10-volume anthology of all of Bishop Barron's writings. Like, you can see that, can't you?
Yep.
Yeah, you can see it.
I'll spend the latter half of my life reading that.
Oh yeah, I can't even
Catching
keep
up.
up with the stuff that he writes every day, and I'm
know.
like, bruh, don't you got like emails to? Okay, but no. So yeah, this is actually a topic that's kind of really close to my heart. So one of the things, if you're not familiar with Bishop Barron, is that he is, in my estimation, one of the most intellectual men that we have, especially as a bishop. But he has an acute ability to bring it down to the popular level, to bring it down to the level of the people without sacrificing any content, without sacrificing any meaning, because he, with the church, desperately wants people to be able to understand the richness of our faith, and he has a very particular ability to do that. I think about like Dr. Brant Petrie is one of those too.
Yeah. Incredible.
So Bishop Barron is talking about some of the works of John Paul II that don't maybe get as much press, especially if you're not like in grad school or you're just not super interested in John Paul II and like phenomenology. But he's highlighting in one of his writings mentions, Bishop Barron, is the fact that from the 1950s to the late 1970s, Karol Wojtyla, who became Pope St. John Paul II, he was actually a professor of moral philosophy at the Catholic University of Lublin in Poland. That's I feel like that's a little known fact, even though he was there for 2 decades.
Yeah.
Like, people don't really remember that about him, but he was. And he actually specialized in sexual ethics and what we could call today like marriage and family life.
Yeah.
So that's why you have these John Paul II institutes on marriage and family all around the world, because this is something that's very, very deeply seated in his heart.
And what a beautiful thing that, like, we talk about this, that he wasn't married, nor did he have children, yet he had beautiful insights on what it should look like.
Yeah.
And I think a part of that is because he spent time with families and,
Yeah.
and with these couples and with people, and he journeyed with them. And I think that's important for priests, is that you have to be in and with families in order to have these insights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, there's a very particular sense of John Paul II. Like, he's not afraid to look things in the eye that he doesn't understand, and kind of wrap himself around it.
Sure.
Because you hear about how he even, was editing the Theology of the Body Catechesis and Love and Responsibility. And what did he do? He would like take people out into the woods, like married couples and families and young people, and he would just ask them questions. He would basically just bounce ideas off of them. And that, I mean, like what you were talking about earlier, like that really places him in a position of deep humility to say, this is what I know from an intellectual level. This is what I can intuit, but I want to know if the experience plays out in a way that's real. And he's willing to sacrifice himself to that. He's willing to put himself below that, submissio, to put himself below the mission of promulgating the truth. And I think that's so deeply needed even still today. But yeah, so 2 books that don't get as much press: The Acting Person, which is this rigorous philosophical exploration of Christian anthropology. Just what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a human person? And then Love and Responsibility, which is kind of, people will say it's like the philosophical side of Theology of the Body. If Theology of the Body is the theology, then Love and Responsibility is the philosophy that comes before it. So it's an analysis of love, sex, and marriage from his philosophical view. Because remember, he was a professor of philosophy for many, many years. Because this is definitely in his wheelhouse. And these texts, both of them together, really provided the foundation for the entire texture of the Theology of the Body. And you see that because these are, I almost think about like these writings as like his mode of thinking. He's just letting you into, this is what I'm working with, because it's not what you're used to.
Yeah.
And he was innovative in his philosophy anyway, because he's what we call like a phenomenological Thomist, which basically just means that like he's very much in the school of Thomas Aquinas. He like upholds the tradition and has a very systematic way of thinking, but he also really, like, phenomenology is just like looking at human experience. And that's what Theology of the Body is. It's looking at fundamental human experience and saying, okay, what do we know about ourselves by looking at these things? And he marries those things together in a way that I think just has so much potential for just centuries of fruit. But anyway, so rounding back to the point, I'm gushing a little bit. But
Why not,
he, particularly in The Acting Person, which is, I've read parts of it. It's really hard to find. And I don't even know how many copies are available in English because it's just like really obscure. But I read parts of it and it's really challenging. Do you remember reading any of this?
I have not read The Acting Person. I've read Love and Responsibility.
Yeah. And again, like I've only read paragraphs of The Acting Person because I don't speak Polish. But it's really convicting and really challenging. But basically, like the thrust of what he's dealing with is that when you're making an ethical decision, a moral agent doesn't not only give rise to a particular act, but he also contributes to the person he's becoming. What does that mean? That means that I can't do something with my person, with my mind, with my hands, whatever. I can't do something without it affecting who I am.
Yeah.
And so he's getting to the heart of like our character is not separate from our person. And I think he's really just drilling down to, okay, well, can I say that I'm still a good person even if I do things that aren't so good? Which is a pretty pervasive moral problem today.
Yeah, and I think it's really speaking to the fact that God has called us to be co-creators, to be able to not only participate in ordering creation, but also ordering ourselves, our own internal garden. And so I think one of the ideas that one of the illustrations I like is the person, the ethical person as an artist who through his art, through his actions, is participating in the beauty of himself.
Yeah, that's
right.
beautiful.
So just like an artist makes a work of art and they're painting and they're mine or they're sculpting, they are bringing something. The role of the artist is they bring something beautiful in the world, something true, something that speaks, that reveals. And they are co-creating. Yeah. And likewise, we have a role in co-creating ourselves with God.
Yeah.
That we, through our actions and through our decisions and our sacrifices towards love, can make ourselves more beautiful, or we could make ourselves distorted or something hideous. Like God gives us that participatory role in our own work.
Yeah. No, and that's a really good point just about like virtue ethics in general. Like I think we have this idea that there's just a very black and white way of looking at it. Like I am not virtuous now, but I will be virtuous one day. And there's just some kind of abyss between those two states of being.
Yeah.
Whereas instead, virtue is really just the process of becoming more of who I'm created to be. I'm not becoming something other. I'm co-creating with the Lord and making myself the most of what I'm created to be. I have the potential for all of these things, and I have to exercise that, to work with that. That's very Aristotelian language, in order to make myself entirely who I am, with the help of God, of course. But I mean, you might see the same principle in sports. So it's always helpful to kind of go back to that, because Aristotle does the same thing. So think about like if you swing a golf club or a tennis racket, if you do it the wrong way enough times, you're going to become a bad golfer or a bad tennis player. You're going to have really bad form. Your shots are not going to go where you want them to. And you're just probably not going to do very well.
That kind of explains it then. I'm sorry, but now I'm picking up what you're putting down. Go ahead.
There you go. Yeah. Well,
there we are.
So who says we don't talk about sports in the Catholic Underground? Welcome. Come, sit at our feet.
Mark that, because that'll be like once in a lifetime.
Check.
We did it once for the year. Put it on the list.
We've met our quota.
But no, like, so if you do swing it, like if you have someone first to show you how to swing it correctly and to watch you as you do it, to help you get better, and then you are able to perform that action repeatedly, habitually, so that you do in fact become a good golfer, provided again that you know the rules and all that stuff. But like your form is going to be good. Same with like powerlifting, I imagine. All of these things are theoretical for me, but like the same with powerlifting or basketball. I can relate to that. Basketball. So like if I shoot 100 free throws, by the end of that, I'm going to be a better free throw player or shooter than I was at the beginning. I'm going to be better.
Yeah.
And so John Paul, like I said, is really putting his finger on like a typical problem of our time. And that's this divorce between the idea that I can do lots of bad things but still be a good person. And I think that that's kind of tied into this whole like, well, I can be spiritual but not religious.
Right.
Because who I am is different than what I do. And that's really the divide between spirituality, quote unquote, and religion, the state of being versus the state of doing. Whereas we know that those always flow back and forth into one another. That it's not even a linear trajectory, so that I go from the state of being into the state of doing, but it's always flowing back in on itself.
The Catechism actually talks about being and action as mutually illuminating, right? How do we learn who a person is? By experiencing their actions. And so we reveal ourselves through what we do. But the more we experience what a person does, we get to have a better understanding of their person, of who they are, to the point that they're mutually illuminating, because the more I experience what you do, the better I understand who you are. But the more I understand who you are, the better I can anticipate and understand what you do, right? They're mutually, they're reciprocal. And then the Catechism says, and this is how God is in relationship with creation. We understand who he is by his works in creation, and the more we understand who he is from what he does, the more we're able to understand what he does and what he will do in our own lives spiritually.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, making that connection to like discernment. Like I've heard someone describe it as being able to sniff out God, and you can only do that if you know what he smells like.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, no, and I think that it ties into another interesting issue that has been around in the church since, I mean, really before the church existed as the Catholic Church, but like this problem of Gnosticism, this problem of like a dualism, because really that's what it is. Like it's the idea that I can separate myself from my body, the idea that my real person is somehow hiding within me, and it's beyond what I do with the concrete motions of my body. But that's not a holistic view of the person. That's a heretical view of the person. And something that we are still battling today. The idea that that those two things, like you were saying, like that they don't have anything to do with each other, when in fact they have everything to do with each other. And this is, again, like a fight that's been going on in Catholic philosophy and theology for centuries, just absolutely centuries, but it manifests in different ways. And so it's getting this new form in 2018, and in the, I would say, the past like 40 years, it's taking on a new form. And so it's important for us to return to these basic principles. The acting person, what is that? Who is that? And what does God have to do with that? And so now Bishop Barron, he takes an interesting turn, which is really really prevalent, really important. He applies this principle of the acting person, the idea that what I do has bearing on who I am, and he applies it to sexual behavior. Because how often do we talk about how like, you know, I can sleep around, I can do whatever I want with my body because it's my body, right. But I talk about it as if it's something other. Mm-hmm. I talk about my body as if it's something that I have possession over, that's something that I have utility over, mm-hmm. and something that I use to complete my will. And that's not a person. That's someone who's experiencing a divorce of self. And so he talks about a study, or multiple studies that have shown that teenagers and college students are participating more and more in this hookup culture. This is not anything new, but it's an environment. Oh, Father Ryan, we'll talk later. But yeah, it's just an environment where like these casual and impersonal forms of sexual behavior are just accepted. This is just the way things are done. Mm-hmm. And I think that the evolution of the smartphone has not really helped that, because you can, again, continue to divorce the person from the body when things are able to be objectified at, you know, high speed. Yeah. And as recently as 30 years ago, there was still, even among some teenagers, a sense that sexual contact belonged at least in the context of a loving or a committed relationship. But now today, it really appears as though even that small little holdout is disappearing. Oh, yeah. Because again, I have an idea that my body is something other than me, that it's something that I can use to fulfill my own will, whatever that is, and whatever, you know, wounds I'm acting out of. And so then who knows what's going to happen? Yeah. Love doesn't really play a role anymore. Ooh.
Yeah, and Olivia and I, we just got off of a young adult retreat called Echo, and we talked about Echo and Don Mox Ministries here on the show, and talking about just this you know, theology of the body and what it means for us as young adults. And you know, it's at times when I go to Echo, I'm like, this is it. Like this is the last holdout of people who believe. Or at least, like, you know, even sometimes I look around and I go, I'm not even sure if, like, everybody here believes that. There can't be this many people that believe, you know, in one place that, you know, that in theology of the body, in the act of, you know, the idea of keeping sex within marriage and the beauty and the sacredness of who we are, and you know, and this idea of, you know, what we do and who we are, and how that affects each other. And it can be really discouraging for people who, you know, who are that small amount, who do feel, especially for teenagers, man, when you're the teenager who's like, yeah, I believe in chastity and, you know, keeping my virginity until I get married. Like, what a weirdo, sometimes people say.
Yeah, because you're the only one.
Yeah, and it can be lonely and definitely isolating, even as a young adult, you know.
Yeah, so I think one of the questions that arise when people think about things like sex or sexuality is that there's a question, well, what about pleasure? You know, what about how can we make sure that I'm going to be able to enjoy life, enjoy myself, and just in anything, if we get too addicted to pleasure, right? I think this is why fasting on a regular basis is so important, because if we can't say no to pleasure, we're not going to have the ability to say yes to love, right? Because it's too hard. This requires sacrifice. Yeah. But and one of the things I like to tell people is that when the church is looking at relationships and looking at things like sex, her primary question is, what about love? Yeah. How do we maintain the integrity of making sure that we are not compromising our heart's ability to love? And if we start viewing things that way, it's a very different way of approaching morality. It's a very different way of approaching what we do with our body and how this reveals who we are and who we are called to be.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, and I think too about, especially about the next part of this, basically that, you know, if we accept now this old premise. It's not old. It's just part of human nature. This old premise that that what I do with my body affects who I am as a person, or what I do in general affects who I am as a person. Then there's going to be ramifications for when I act like it doesn't. Or when someone acts upon me as if it doesn't. And so, Dr. Leonard Sachs, he's this physician, this psychiatrist, and he's exploring this phenomenon of the hookup culture. And what he's finding is that that a lot of people are ending up in his office under the guise of psychiatry, and they're just filled with debilitating depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, because these things have effects. And I think about something that is Jean-Luc Marion says. He's another phenomenologist. He talks about the heart being the place where body and soul meet, and so no wonder, when we experience things emotionally or physically, it's our heart that's targeted almost immediately. And so these things like depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, like they have a real sense of physical pain involved with them, because that gateway through the heart is allowing, and again, this is philosophical, but like that gateway through the heart is allowing emotional pain to manifest physically. And vice versa. Physical pain will manifest emotionally. And he says that these symptoms are a kind of like function of a cognitive dissonance. So the wider society is telling teenagers and everyone that they can behave in any way that they like, and they can still be quote unquote good people. But the consciences of these young people are telling a different story, and that's the key. That's the thing. And I've talked with like older people and just people who have different views on sexuality in any realm about these things. What's always interesting is there are very few young people usually involved in those conversations. And if there is, I feel like the need to be like the token young person. Even though I'm getting older. But what's interesting is you bring that into it, that like young people know that something's wrong.
Oh yeah.
They know that they're being lied to. They know that this is not what they're created for. And it's met with this like, really?
Yeah.
Because they were lied to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, the fact that, it's almost, you gotta like praise God for the fact that that if these people are ending up in Dr. Sachs's office, if they're ending up, in front of Father Ryan and other priests, if they're ending up in your office or your, front porch or wherever, and they're hurting, then it's at least a fundamental affirmation of the fact that we are created to be whole human persons.
Yeah.
We're not created to be chopped up into discrete parts and only act out of one part or another. We're meant to be whole and complete persons. And so, like, you always gotta like go back to Job and just say like, well, blessed be God, like blessed be God for this pain, even if it just signals me to the fact that I'm human.
Yep. One of the greatest things I ever heard was, if I punch you, I don't say like my arm punched you. Sorry, my arm punched you, but I'm sorry that I punched you. I never punched anybody before, but that whole idea of like we can't separate ourselves, like we can't dissect and just say, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
I'm not touching you.
It was it's just my arm.
There's space between atoms, and therefore we can never bridge the distance.
Yes, indeed.
Brilliant.
The acts we perform. Now, Jeff, one of the acts that we like to perform here on the Catholic Underground is a little part we like to call
the CU Pick of the Week.
I'm so glad that worked.
Well done.
Yeah.
Did the thing.
Okay, so for our first pick of the week, I think we'll go to Olivia.
Well, look at that. I can no longer follow Kathleen. It's a beautiful day. So my pick of the week, I'm going to have trouble pronouncing, and I'm just admitting that now. But it's Privé Revaux. I don't know. It'll be in the show notes. But there's sunglasses.
Nice.
So I lost my other sunglasses.
Oh, they
a few
really are
weeks
your
ago.
pick of the week.
Yeah. You thought I was joking.
I know. I was giving you a
No,
hard
these really
time
are my
earlier.
pick of the week. And I feel like, yeah, okay. Gonna take those off.
It's cool to wear sunglasses inside.
And at
I'm
night.
not. Don't if you start singing that.
And at night.
Okay.
Saucy.
Anyway, so I lost my sunglasses, and I don't like to spend a lot of money on them. I'm not one of those people where I can spend money on Ray-Bans, even though like they're super nice. But these have great build quality, and they come with a lot of stuff. It comes with this like collapsible sunglasses case, so that when you're wearing them and they're in your purse or your truck or whatever, then it collapses. It doesn't take up a lot of space. But the build quality is great. They're all about $30, which again is pretty cheap for sunglasses that are going to last you more than 10 minutes. And so they've already taken quite a beating, and I don't have scratches. I don't have major issues. So That's my pick of the week.
Very nice. Let's go up to the Jeff Star 1, Mr. Blackwell.
Here's something that's safe in space. I love a tuna fish. Well, you have to be careful how often you eat it, but Star-Kissed Tuna Creations have come out with these bold flavors, and there's a link in the show notes if you're interested. But they are really high in protein, practically no carbs, 70 calories per serving, and they're delicious. Now, this one is the hot buffalo style. I'm holding up to your radio, and it really it's not that spicy. It's got a little zing to it, but the flavor is great. It doesn't even taste like tuna fish. And then the other one is the jalapeno, and it's got a little zing to it, kind of a vinegary taste, but really they're delicious. They're easy and affordable, like $1 to $1.50 at most stores. So that's my pick of the week: the Star-Kissed Tuna Creations.
Nice. Well, you know who's full of zing? Father Ryan Hofford. What you got?
Zing. All right. So I want to take an opportunity to draw attention to it's an apostolate here in the Baton Rouge area called Metanoia Manor, and it's a home that is for young women, all minors who have been rescued from sex slavery, from human trafficking, and this is a problem in Louisiana and many states around our country. But this is run by some religious sisters, and they're actually having a fundraiser for those in Louisiana, Baton Rouge area, August 26th. It's at the Varsity. It's a concert, and it's also a fundraiser for them. But doors open 3:30 p.m. It's $15 a person, and there's going to be the Grammy-winning Lost Bayou Ramblers performing along with a more of a local group, the Whiskey Priests. Some of the people we know are in that. You have to be 18 plus to get in, and you get the tickets. You can go to the Varsity, also here in Baton Rouge, and buy those. But for those who aren't in the area and that want to support this mission, you can go to www.metanoia/inc-inc.org. So that's Metanoia, metanoia-inc.org, and that will be on the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some other ways to donate to this as well. It's a great ministry that's popped up here. Not popped up. They've been working on it for a long time. One that's certainly needed. And so we'll put ways to donate that, ways to get involved if you want to come to the event. Come on.
Yeah.
We'll put all that in the show notes. But
wait, isn't there don't we have a Catholic Underground that evening?
Is it Sunday?
So it's at 3:30.
Yeah,
it's at 3:30, and so then afterwards, you'll be
that's
fine.
That's our pregame before
pregame.
Yes.
Catholic
Kathleen, what is your pick of the week?
I have a great pick of the week. Okay, so as a theologian, theologian, someone who teaches theology, who's now still in school for theology for my master's, I often feel a lot of pressure to read spiritual books. I don't know if you get this at all, but I grew up reading all kinds of stuff. I love to read, and now I just don't read for fun. So I picked up this summer this book. I was with Father Chris. We went to Barnes and Noble and just walked around. And I picked up this book. It's called The Residence: Inside the Private World of the White House. And I love this stuff. I love behind the scenes. And what it talks about is it goes through, what goes on with the staff and behind the scenes of the everyday workings of the White House.
I see the words Downton Abbey on the front, so I'm in.
Yeah. What is this? Yeah. Downton Abbey for the White House staff.
Oh.
That's from today.
I can do that.
Quoted.
I can do that.
I am the kind of person, and Father Chris and I talked about this, how when you go to the White House and you look out, we usually go for the March for Life and we're standing outside. I am the one who's not wow, look how beautiful this house is. I'm the one going, I wonder where all the snipers are.
Oh, man.
And then
There's ways to find out.
I know. But considering that there's always 450 people in my charge, I would, and that my mother would kill me before the somehow
on a drone.
Revive her. So.
She'd be like, bring her back. But yeah, it's really cool. It goes through all the presidents and how some of the White House, how the White House staff responded to them, and how a lot of the first ladies would come and redecorate, or some of them would come in and be like, whatever, and some of them came in and were very strict. And but I encourage you. I know summer is coming to an end. to find something that you enjoy reading.
Well, Kathleen, if you were the first lady, would you redecorate or just go with the way it is?
I'd probably redecorate a little bit. But I'm also about like a tradition, especially American tradition. Like if that's the way that George Washington wanted it, fine by me. Like I'm not touching hundreds of years worth of stuff. However, we do need a little sparkle.
I was about to say,
Some
how
glitter.
many things would have glitter, Kathleen?
Man, just a
Conservative estimate.
It's all the original George Washington environment with glitter.
Yeah, with a little
We
bit
just
of glitter here and
bedazzled
there.
this bust. What's
Yeah.
the problem?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it talks about how like they have
bling
there's a
bling.
flower shop in the White House.
What?
Yeah. And they were
That
like,
makes sense. That makes sense.
But I mean, yes, it does. But I would take advantage of that full-fledged.
See,
Like,
I'm sitting over here wondering. You're wondering about snipers.
Yeah.
I'm wondering like, what do they eat for breakfast?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there have been a couple
Anything they
of
want.
first ladies who have like moved kitchens like to the upper quarters.
Oh, my.
So they were like, yeah, we don't want to come down to the formal. We want, I think it was Jackie Kennedy
Oh,
who
there it
created
is.
like this family breakfast nook, upstairs, and people were like,
Can she do
Okay.
that? Yeah, she can.
She
yes, she
did.
can because she's the first lady. I don't know if I want to be the first lady or the president.
I could see you as both.
No.
Yeah, I think I'd fail miserably. We'd get blown up or something if I were the president.
No, I have more faith in you than that.
Well, good thing that I'm not, but
For now.
for now,
give it time.
give it time. There's always next year. Jeff, we're always grateful for our viewers, our listeners, and our benefactors, right?
Indeed, we are. And this week, Catholic Underground is possible because of people like you. Join the growing number of undergrounders at CatholicUnderground.com/donate. Also, portions of the Catholic Underground are brought to you by audibletrial.com/Catholic Underground. There's more information at CatholicUnderground.tv.
Absolutely. If you'd like the show notes for this episode, or to subscribe to the podcast audio, go to CatholicUnderground.com. Our panelists this week, just this 1 week, have been Olivia Galino at OM Galino on all the Instagrams.
Yes.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Our guest this week has been Father Ryan Halford, who is the parochial vicar at St. Jude the Apostle Church here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're so glad you're with us.
Woot.
Wonderful.
Yes, indeed. Our technical director is Jeff Blackwell, blackwell.us, at Jeff Blackwellus.
There you go.
On the Instagram and the Twitter, our research assistant and leader of the crew in the lab is Jim Hayes.
Yay.
Our video and graphics director is Ed Ball. In the pit, you know me, I'm Kathleen. And you're stuck with me for 4 months. It's going to be awesome. You can follow me on Instagram at Kaylee626. We hope we've helped you cut through the noise and find that still, small voice. We are the Catholic Underground. We are Faith Gone Digital. And we'll see you next time.
From the Catholic Underground.